The Susan Brender Show is a radio show online broadcasted on YouTube across the United States and globally. The show features guests who speak about health, spirituality, entertainment, and a host of subjects to enlighten people across the nation. Listen to the show that empowers women and men alike and highlights those who have made a difference. I'm Susan Brender, and this is the Susan Brender Show. Imagine this. And I'm going to start off with this because I think it's a wonderful statement. My guest, who is Aeriol Ascher, says, imagine a world where we can all shine. Wouldn't that be amazing? Well, let me tell you a little bit about our guest today. And I'm going to repeat her name again, and it's Aeriol Ascher. She's a healing body, mind, and soul podcast network person who has won 2 communicative awards of distinction, and she's made a huge impact on audiences as a holistic educator and powerful presence coach. Welcome to the Susan Brender Show, Aeriol Ascher. It's a pleasure to have you on.
Well, thank you for having me, Susan. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, let's start a little bit. Why did you write that statement, imagine a world where we can all shine?
That was for a particular talk that I was doing, actually, but I really believe that it is a time when we can all shine. In my metaphysical work, I really talk to people about connecting to their inner essence and their inner divine light, and letting their soul light shine, Susan.
Sometimes you have to tell a little bit about your work as a metaphysical teacher and healing artist. Not everybody understands what that is, and I think it would be important that our audience know a little bit more.
Yes, I teach meditation and energy healing work. I do body work. I worked as a massage therapist for years and years and also studied metaphysics. I am an intuitive reader and healer. So I work with energy and most recently sound. So when I do work with people, sometimes we're doing coaching work and sometimes we're actually doing body work where they're laying on the table, and I'm doing sound healing work and leading them through guided meditation or sometimes just silence with the sound to move energy blocks out of the physical body and out of the energy body.
Aeriol, I'll tell you something interesting. I've heard about these things before, but there's a lot of doubt when it comes to these kinds of things, and we have to be very honest about it. This is kind of a strange thing, metaphysical, but I'm sure that if people understand your experience with it, they'll like it even more than I thought they would, because you really have the passion. I hear the passion in your voice for what you do. So let's get back to the phrase metaphysical. Define it for us. What does it mean?
It's really just about energy, Susan. I teach and work with energy and consciousness perspective, right? In the human body, when we get triggered and have an emotion, chemicals are released from our body. It releases energy in our body. We can feel it. We'll blush sometimes, or if anger rises. A lot of times now there's a lot of stuff going on in the media. Even just a glance at something like that can have people in a different state of mind. What I do is I help people get that clear mindset, and I teach them how to get the junk like that. I always say the issues are in the tissues. All the emotional stuff. That's why I do body work. I lay my hands on people. But we don't always need to do that. Moving any residual energy. If you've ever lost a loved one and experienced grief, you might know that clenching feeling in the chest or heart, in the throat, even when you are biting back words or grief. I assist my clients to help release that kind of stuff, and I use different modalities to do that, and train them to have a daily practice where they can meditate and facilitate that kind of clearing on their own.
I'm glad you brought up this particular time, the time of the pandemic, where so many people are depressed and they're anxious and they don't even know what to do with themselves. And they come into, even the whole mental health world is really dealing with that because there are so many people who are facing that. With that said, okay, let's walk us through. Somebody who is now, thinking they have to be put into a little box. I call it a little box where they sit, they have to look at the walls, they watch television, that's all they do. And they decide that this is not the way to live, okay? So they come into Aeriol Ascher's empowering situation, and what happens?
Well, it really depends on if I'm seeing somebody one-on-one. I have a small studio in my home, and since the pandemic, I'm not really seeing new clients one-on-one. I do see people over Zoom, and I do kind of the same thing. The first thing they do is they'll sit down. I'll talk them through a guided meditation where I teach them, instruct them to breathe, to say hello to their body, to connect into the planet by placing a metaphorical grounding cord into the planet. I help them get plugged in to their body and raise their sense of self-awareness so that they can even be conscious of the state they're in. I think half of everybody is so stressed out, Susan, that they don't even realize that their bodies are in a state of fight or flight. And when I do these breathing exercises, or if I'm fortunate enough to work with them in person one-on-one, when I use my singing bowls or sound or energy to it kind of lulls the nervous system, the parasympathetic nervous system, into a hypnotic state. It really just tells the body it's not fight or flight time, where you're going to be okay. So people have a chance to reset.
Wow. I want to know, you also do a podcast, so we're like colleagues in a way, but nevertheless, let's let our audience know a little bit about your podcast, which is called Healing Body, Mind, and Soul. Tell us a little bit about that, if you would.
Awesome. Thanks for asking. Yeah, we are so excited. Healing Body, Mind, and Soul is doing so well. We're reaching so many people, and we've just won 2 awards, one for our series and one for myself for show host. We're super excited about that. Every week I interview healing artists, practitioners, teachers, and coaches with different empowering self-care techniques that they can share with the audience. And recently we've just done a self-care under quarantine series that got a little bit of recognition as well. And I just gather experts that are in the field, in all different fields really, having to do with healthcare, self-care, spiritual self, a couple of meditation teachers, all kinds of different mind and body practitioners have been on the show.
Yeah. Meditation. What's the percentage of people who understand what the health meditation can do? I'd like a little bit of data. Do you have any data on that? Because, people talk about meditation. It's not easy, by the way. And I really hope that you explain that to our audience, because meditation can really help. I know that. But is there any specific evidence, and I'm going to call it evidence?
Top of my head, I don't have any. I love the way you think, Susan. I do not have any of that empirical data in front of me right now. But people are more productive when they are in the beta, when they're not in that regular trance state. I call it just the trance state of their awakening consciousness, right? When they learn to control their own brain waves so that they can go into the alpha states and the theta states of being, that's when the parasympathetic nervous system can be activated and your body can really replenish and heal. If people can get a handle on this, they can really, really counteract the stress that is endured on their body, the emotional stress and the physical tension and that's held in the physical body.
Right. And is it different for men and women?
Ooh, that's a good question, isn't it? I don't personally have any evidence. My clientele is largely related to women, but I work with a lot of women groups. I don't exclude men in any way. I do have male clients. I think there was a time I would have said that women might be better at meditation only because they have a natural connection to their intuition and can connect to themselves in that way. But I don't know if that's true any longer. I've noticed a lot of men waking up and having brilliant consciousness and being very perceptive. So I'm not gonna make any judgment calls there for myself. So
I hear you.
I work largely with women, so I do know for a fact that
Right. Now, go ahead. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Go ahead. That's all right. I'm done talking
about
that.
Well, I'm just thinking, when we were talking about men and the difference between men and women, I was thinking about kids. Now, here's the thing. If kids, and let's say little girls at this point, if little girls were to start to meditate and to start doing yoga, for example, at the beginning of their life, and I don't mean when they're babies, I mean when they're a little older, would this be better for them, learning how to do this? Because, I don't know, they don't have the patience of an adult. However, if they start when they're very young, it may be the beginning of something wonderful for them, right? To get rid of stress, to learn how to deal with it.
I love your line of thinking here. I am an absolute advocate of arts in schools, and I actually teach public speaking in schools, and I do meditation with the kids. I kind of slip it in there. We don't call it meditation per se. I call it imagination activation when I'm working with the kids. I teach improv and public speaking and support them just to be better communicators and to be able to manage that internal state of emotion as well as the external state, what they're saying and how they're delivering it. As far as girls, you bet. The earlier that you can get kids, and you know what? You don't even have to. They get it. They can immediately slip in and out of that sort of exalted state of consciousness, when they're in the learning state.
Yeah, I really believe that. Now, let's move on. And what I want to know is that there is a particular edition of the Women's Empowerment. I guess that's a book. Am I right about that?
Oh, yeah, you do your homework. Sue, thank you for asking. Yesterday, actually, the day before this recording is taking place, actually, I just launched with a group of other women a book called Experts and Influencers, the Women's Empowerment Edition. And, oh, my gosh, on Amazon in the last 24 hours, I don't know what the exact numbers are, but in 5 countries we have made number 1, and we have had rankings on Amazon also in 23 countries, not number 1 spots, but 23 categories in multiple countries. It's amazing. I don't know how they do that. It's really fun. It's humbling to watch, and it's time for women to step up and into their power, isn't it? We have a lot of stuff going on. It's a different perspective is really needed, I think.
You're absolutely right. I think that women today are dealing with so much. I mean, not only do they have to kind of go to work. We didn't see that in the past, right? And today our women are working as hard as men, and they come home with an amazing amount of stress, having to also deal with kids of their own and worrying about them. So if you had a chance and you tell people, listen, I know the stress that you're dealing with, and I understand it. What is the first thing that you would tell them?
Really, self-care is paramount. Self-care is the oxygen mask that you put on your face first, right? Having a daily meditation practice or having some sort of check-in with the self, you can call it whatever you want. You don't have to ohm on a mountaintop. You can take 30 seconds and go, how am I feeling? Where are my feet? Where am I standing? Is my posture good? Check in with my body. How am I feeling? 30 seconds of mindfulness throughout your day, sprinkled here and there, is going to improve the quality of your life right away. But you need to take the time. You need to take the 30 seconds and consider it imperative self-care.
That's awesome. That's a really good way to get people to think. Now, you say that, or people have said about you, I want to say that your energy lights up. Oh, wait a minute. I thought this was an incredible thing, Aeriol. People have said about you that your energy lights up and uplifts the entire room. You draw your audience in, and I think that's fabulous, because to be able to do that with all the competition in podcasts, you made it happen. How did you make it happen? You told us that you are, really well known, but how did you make that happen?
Well, I just kept doing it, and you have to start. That's one of the things I talk about in the Women's Empowerment book, in the chapter that I contributed there. It's time for women to get published. It's time for women to have podcasts. Sometimes you don't need to invest anything. For some of the podcast platforms, you don't need to invest anything, but start doing it. Start cataloging your wisdom. Share your wisdom. Share your heart with people. This is a time for people to speak up, We need the leaders and the peacekeepers and we need a new kind of gentle leadership that is, I call it a ground team, like really a ground team. When we see so many of our more structures kind of falling apart, we really need our family units to be strong. We need our ground team, our neighborhoods to be strong. And sometimes women may not think that they're leaders, but just stepping forward and being a calming presence and being able to be with people if they're stressing out is important, right?
Right. Yeah, sure. That's really true. Now, another thing that you do, and this is amazing. I mean, you're so involved with so many different things, but one of the things that you do is you have something called speaker success. You're a coach. Now, I interview a lot of coaches, and every coach is a little bit different. What is your way of, kind of expressing to people who come to you? What do you tell them again as a coach? And who comes to you, by the way? I'd like to know that.
Well, I work with authors, speakers, practitioners, other coaches who are wanting to do the inside work, the calming their inside energy so that they can really clarify their message. Because if your message isn't clear and formatted well, it's not going to land with your audience. Right. If you, my background, and you say I light up a room, that's wonderful. But I come by it honestly. I have a degree in theater arts. My background is all in theater arts. I've taught public speaking and drama and image development, all of these things for years before I became a healing artist. And now my careers are kind of folding in on each other, and I'm teaching speakers and practitioners. I used to have a healing center, and I taught them while I was at my center. We would have health talks every week, and I was like, oh my goodness, they can't speak correctly, so I need to support them to be better speakers. So I just have these particular skill sets. So with my Speaker Success program, it's just a 6-week program that I do to help people really clarify, how to network, how to create a speech that is scalable. I mean, we all want that 90-minute keynote speech,
right.
but we want our message to be scalable, right? So that our audience is really connecting to you and that you're accessible. And that's what I teach. I just take all of my background in theater and media production. Actually, I produced a lot of media in my time.
It's interesting that you do that or did that because I too am very interested, of course, in communications. But it's an interesting thing that you mentioned drama, because yesterday I did an interview with a woman who opened a little theater. She had this desire. She said, you know, she retired, and she said, I have this desire to be a person who owns a little theater, and it's geared to people, to women who are over 50. She said they're the forgotten people, and I'm curious about what you think. How do you see younger people? Do you see older people? And is there a difference in the way they express their anxiety or their depression or even their happiness? Which group is like really on top of this whole situation that you have to imagine a world where we can still shine? Do older people kind of express that?
I would say, well, I fall into the over 50 category, just barely. I'm proud to say, and I think that I love this. Your woman opening a theater that is the over 50 crowd. As somebody who has participated in theater, and I'm also a blues singer. I had a band. We competed a lot over the last decade or so in different areas. It's not as easy. It's not as easy being a performer that is in your latter ages than being a performer that is younger, but you don't bring the energy or wisdom. The presence, the energy is not there. So I don't know. As far as a demographic for who is, are you asking for who is interested in metaphysics or who is interested in performing? I just have I have a background in both, so.
Yeah. Well, I know that women who are retired, they kind of fall into the crack. You know, they don't know what to do with their lives. So it would be so great if there's somebody like Aeriol Ascher who could kind of help them move down the path.
Yeah.
Go ahead and tell us a little bit more about that.
The second act. I had another friend who did a whole series of interviews on this topic. I do love the topic. Let me see. I would say I love women over 50 rediscovering themselves and their passions and really getting in alignment with who they really are. You know, that's something that's super exciting and transformational. And you know, just to link it back to your, you know, definitely working in theater is somewhere that women can do that. Working with energy is somewhere that women can do that. Yeah, I love the topic. It's not. I don't have a re-thrival program at the moment, but maybe you've just spurred something, Susan.
I hope so. I hope so, because I think people need it.
Yeah, re-thrival of this. Yes, because the women are the wisdom keepers, and their voices have been silenced in our communities and in our for a long time under just the way that we run our lives. You know, we don't have. Things are not all 50-50 and equal. You know, I think that it's time that we have some re-thrival and revival. I think I'm going to sit with that one, Susan. I think that you may have lit a fire under me there to create something new.
Well, I'm glad I did that. I'm happy that I had an impact on you in some way. Now, we're coming to the end of the show, and people want to know how they get in touch with you. Not only get in touch, but where they can understand a little bit more about what you do. So tell them, how do they get in touch first?
Absolutely. Now, I've got a million websites, but I'm going to give you a website that's easy to find. It's Aeriol, ASKAERIOL.com. Very easy to get all of my contact information. Very easy at that site to, I think there's a couple free downloads. You might be able to get a download from one of my books. There's a couple chapter downloads for free. So ask Aeriol.
What are the names of your books? What are the name of your books?
Oh, I've got, there's one, Experts and Influencers, the Leadership Edition, and there's a free download for a chapter from that called Developing the Leadership Self. There is a chapter download from another book called The Animal Legacies, in which it's all about animals, but I think that's really our connection with nature. And I talk about a personal experience after losing a pet, having to deal with depression and clearing the anxiety and the grief associated with that. And it's a rather magical story. Your readers might enjoy that one. And we don't have a download for the latest one, the Women's Empowerment book, yet, but I think there's some other fun stuff that is available and that people can see if they go to that Ask Aeriol site.
Right. Yeah. Well, today my guest has been Aeriol Ascher, who has a podcast called Healing Body, Mind, and Soul Podcast Network, which she runs. And then the other thing is she's an author and she's a coach. And boy, does she have a lot to help you with. So I want to thank Aeriol Ascher for being on the Susan Brender Show. It's been a real delight.
Oh, it has been wonderful. Thank you. You're so gracious, and you ask great questions, Susan. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Aeriol. I enjoyed having you, believe me.